In this Xcode tutorial, we're going to look at creating a doggy years calculator, where it's going to take in your name, it's also going to take in your current age as an integer, and then it's going to calculate out how old you are and display that in an output area here. We'll be mainly focused on taking information from a text box and also putting information back out to a text box. And we'll explore what it means to use unwrapping and implicitly unwrapped optionals. So let's get underway and start a new project. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new Xcode project. Once again, it's going to be a single view app for an iOS, and click on next. We can enter the project name. I'm going to call this doggy years. Make sure you've got Swift selected and also storyboard user interface. I've also got include unit tests and include UI tests, and click on next. Lastly, we would like to save it. Select a folder on your desktop. You can create a new folder if you like, and click on create. Once the project information opens up, just go down and select the main storyboard. Now I'm going to make sure that I change my iPhone testing to iPhone 11 to also match the current view control that I've got, which is also an iPhone 11. Now the first thing you need to do when creating a project is add some elements. I'm going to be adding a label for a title, and I'm going to change that to be doggy years. Then click out. I'm just going to center that slightly for the time being. The next thing I need to put on is a label, because I'd like a text box for the username. So I'm going to click label again and place that out. Also, I would like to put a text box underneath that for the person's name. And I'm just going to stretch that out a little bit. Now I'd also like them to be able to enter their age. So I'm just going to copy that with the Command C and a Command V, and just copy and paste that just a little bit below. The next thing I need for my GUI is a button. This is going to be our call to action button here. And then the last thing we need is an output area, which is in this case going to be a text box again. While we could use a label, I'm just going to use a text box. I'm going to make that slightly larger, but we'll work on that a little bit later. And now I have the basic elements in. What I'd like to do now is change my labels and actually give them some context. So I'm going to change label to your name. And then in the text box, I'm going to put some placeholder text in there. Enter your name. This way the user will know to enter their name. This one here will be their current age. And then I want them to enter their age. So once again, I'm going to use placeholder text. And I'm also giving them an example like EG 12. This way they've got an idea of what to enter in. Now in the output area, I'm going to put a placeholder text in there. I'm just going to put your age in doggy years. This way they know where the output's going to be, but also I'm just going to center that text as well. Now I'm just going to select everything other than the title. I'm just going to move it down slightly on our UI, just to give it a space between here and the title. And now what I'm going to do is just change the title a little bit. So what I want to do is change the color. At the moment it's in a default color. So I'm going to go through, you can select custom color, open up the custom color wheel, go through, find a color you would like. I'm just going to use the one I've got here and click on close. Then you can add it to your palette if you like. Once I've got that there, I can then change its font and its size. Currently the font is a system font. We can go to custom and then we'll get a list of all our computer fonts or system. I'm going to select marker felt. If you don't have any interesting fonts, I'll put a link to a tutorial on how to install fonts onto your computer. This will show you some places you can download some more creative fonts for your applications. Once you've done that, you can then enter a size. I'm going to select 45 points and click on done. I can then move that into position where I'd like it, center of the screen, and let that go. I'm happy with the current text boxes and labels, but I'd like to change the button a little bit. The button's currently a default button. What I'd like to do is actually put a picture. So I've gone into Photoshop and I've just edited an image and put Click Me on it. And I'm just going to add that now to my assets. So I'm going to open up my assets, drag the resource across, and let that go. You can now see the object itself. So this has been added to my library now. So when I head back to my main storyboard, select the button, go over to the properties, and then what I'd like to do is change this to the image. So I'm just going to select the image and select my doggy button. Now I have my button on stage. I'm just going to click off that and just center that a little bit more. So visually it looks in the middle of the page. Now this button will work the exact same as the text, but can make your app look a lot more interesting. Now once I've got all my objects on the stage, I now need to put constraints in. This will ensure when the application is uploaded to your phone that it holds its position on screen. So I'm just going to select everything at the moment and go down, and I'm going to add the auto constraints. So there's one here that says add missing constraints. I'm just going to click on that. You notice that all the constraints have now been added to the objects. So therefore when I test my program now, you can see that all the objects are proportional to the screen, and I can click on the little puppy dog to do my calculation. Alright, so I'm happy with my layout and I've got all my objects on the screen. You can later, after we finish coding, go and add more detail to the UI to improve the user experience. But let's get coding now. So I'm just going to stop the simulator and I'm going to head up and click Editor Options and click on the Assistant. Now the Assistant will allow us to create links between the GUI, the graphical user interface, and also the coding area. Now the first thing we need to do is make an area for our outlets. Now outlets connect our objects on our screen to our code. So the first outlet I'm going to grab is enter your name. I'm going to hold down Control, click, drag across, and then release. This will create an outlet and we can give it a name. Now I'm going to use Hungarian notation for a text box, which is TXT, and then use camel case for username. So it starts with lowercase and then every word after that goes with a capital. And then I'm going to make a connection by going connect. You can see there's a dot here. That shows there's a connection between this outlet and this object here. Now I'm also going to do the same for age. TXT, user age. And the last one I'm going to make a connection with is the output area, which is the doggy years. And click on connect. So these are my outlets now, where I'm going to take input or output. So in your applications, if you need to take information from a user or give it back to the user, you have to create an outlet. The next thing we need to do is create an event trigger for our Click Me button. We're going to create a connection much the same as an outlet, but this is going to be known as an action. So I'm going to hold down Control, click, and drag across. Now this goes in a slightly different spot. You notice it goes after the view did load. So you can see the open brace here and the close brace. So it goes after the close brace and before the close brace of the view controller. Then we need to give it a name. So this is coming from a button, so it's going to be BTN, and I'm going to call it doggy years. And I'm going to give it another name on the end called action. So that way I know this is an action for doggy years from the button. And I'm going to click on connect. You'll notice it has a slightly different build to what an outlet is, as it is a function. And it's receiving information from the sender, and it's going to be any information. So our code to process the information is going to fit between this brace here, which is an open brace, and the close brace here. Now there's three parts to any program. There is the input, there is the processing, and there is the output. In some programs, you have to get some input, process, then get some more input, process, and then output. Sometimes you've got to get some input, process, output, then more input, process, output. So it's not standardized as input, process, output, but this is the basic structure. So let's start by doing an output. Let's talk to this text box here. Now we know it has an outlet name of txt doggy years, so we want to talk to that. So txt, and because we use the Hungarian notation, all my text boxes are listed. So I can just select doggy years. And I want to talk to the text part of that text box. So I'm going to put dot text, and then I can make that equal something. Now it can only take strings. So these are lists of characters, so chars. So I'm just going to put in here doggy years. So I just want an output into this area here. So if I click this button, it says doggy years down here. So let's test our program to make sure that that connection between the GUI, the user interface, and my code is working. There we go, we can see that working now. So let's stop the program now. Once we've done that, I need to read in the username and also their current age. So let's do that in the input because that's coming from the user, so that's input from the user. So we need to create a variable for this. So we're going to use a let. Now the reason for using a let and not a var is this name is not going to change anywhere else in our program. The only time it gets updated is when we click this button, so it's only done once, and therefore it's a let rather than a var. If you do put a var in there, the computer will say, look, it should be a let, not a var, and it'll give you some little errors coming up on the right hand side in yellow. So you've got to watch out for these errors that appear, but they appear all the time as you code, and you just got to know what you're doing as you're stepping through them. Because I'm creating a let, I need to create a variable for the name. So I'm going to call this username. Once again, I'm using camel case, and I'm going to let that equal to the text username. Now using txt, that makes it different to username, so therefore they are two different objects. Now from the txt username, which is an outlet, which is this text box, I want something from that text box, and I want what's in the text area of it. Because that text box is an object, it can pass in its font colors, everything. But I'm looking for a particular thing, and in this case, I'm looking just for the text. Okay, now it's also said here that because we haven't used it, we might want to change the let just to an underscore, but we're not going to worry about that at the moment because we're going to use it down in our processing and definitely our output here. So that's our username coming into here. The other thing I need to get is their age. And that is also coming from a text box. So we're going to use the txt once more, and we're going to get user age. And we want the text part of that text box. Now you know from other tutorials that because we're taking in text and we want user age and we want to perform a mathematical calculation with the user age, we need to typecast this, which means we need to change it from being a string and turn it into an integer. To do that, we're going to use the command int. So this will take the text part of that text box and turn that to an integer. Now we're starting to look at the wrappers. So you can start seeing the value of optional strings. Now the unwrapped must be unwrapped because Swift would like to know if there is information in this text box or not. So I'm going to put an exclamation mark at the end to tell Swift, don't worry about looking at it. It may contain a null value. So therefore, don't worry about it. The same with username here. At the moment, that also may contain a null value. Now that I've got both those pieces of information, I can now start processing. So I'm going to let doggy years is going to be equal to our user age times 7. Because they say that every human year is worth 7 dog years. Now once again, we're getting an error here. And that's because user age is looking at this text box, and this text box may be empty, and we need that for a calculation. So once again, we need to put an exclamation mark at the end. Now the current error is coming up because we haven't used it yet. We've created a variable, not used it, and this is the same error for username. But we're about to use it now. So in our output, we've got some text here at the moment, and we want to be able to use some more text as well. So let's start with the person's name. So let's start with username. So if I enter in Leon, it's going to say Leon. And now this variable, which is here, is looking at an empty text box. So remember, we've got to put an exclamation mark on the end because it could be empty. And then we're going to add something to this text. And what we're going to add is some more characters. So we're going to put UR, and we're going to put a comma. So it could say Leon, comma, UR. And then we're going to put a space, and then we're going to put how old you are, which is the doggy years. So we're going to add the doggy years onto that. Now the problem with doggy years, we know from int here that the text has been typecast to an integer. That integer has been stored in user age. That user age has now gone through a process that has now been put in doggy years, and now we want to use doggy years. And that now is still an integer because of this typecasting here. So we need to turn doggy years back to a string. Therefore, we have text, which is a string, plus some text, which is a string, and then we've added on the doggy years as a string as well. And I just want to put some characters on the end, so I'm just going to add in dog years. Now you can see that we've got an error down here, so let's have a look at this. Cannot force unwrapped value of non-optional string or type string. So what we're trying to do is unwrap a string, which we have done here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to remove that, because it's not until you use it that you need to actually do the wrapping. So this is taking the text part, put it into the variable. Now that we're using it, we now have to use the unwrap, and you notice the error has disappeared. So let's go and test our program now. So we're going to build our project. You notice we have our interface. Now with our interface, we can actually go into devices, and if you need to restart your device, you can do so. You can also look in I/O, you can change its input. So we're going to send keyboard input to device. Under keyboard, you can actually select if you use the hardware keyboard or toggle the software keyboard with Command K. So in here, if I select the text field, I can go Command K, and you can see the keyboard come up or go down. So if I wanted to, I can then go Shift L-E-O-N and then go Command K to toggle that back down. Otherwise, I can enter my age by using the keyboard. So I'm just going to put in here 20. And then when I click on Click Me, you'll notice that Leon, you are 140 in dog years. So I hope you found this tutorial useful. If you did, give it a like, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also have a look around my YouTube channel for other useful Xcode tutorials.